So this is
Yeah.
fun. I have the book right here. It's such a beautiful book. Oh my God.
Thank you.
Like the images are beautiful. I have to say it's my favorite of all you've written
Ah,
because
yeah,
it
you know it.
has such depth of information and it's gorgeous.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Well, I have this right here.
Woohoo!
Oh, yeah. And this is super
Oh, I got to take a picture of
inspiring.
that.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Deb, hold his up.
Oh, okay. We're gonna have a picture.
There we go. Wait,
We
I'll
can
be
post it
honored.
on our.
yeah.
I don't
how
have
do
your book yet, Rusty, but Deb sent me copies or
I
images.
sent
how do
her.
I take a picture?
Control or Command Shift 3. But I can send this to you.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I gotta hold a book.
Yeah. What do you
Okay, hold on.
She's gonna get a book to hold.
Something.
Oh, that's her other. This is her other book.
Oh,
Her
yeah.
very inspiring book. She's like this
Rusty,
amazing.
do you have this one?
No, it's
Okay, I gotta send you a copy.
yeah.
All right.
You
Let's
can't.
see.
Oh,
All right,
wait.
Deb. Okay, let's see if I could do this because I usually do two
Oh, yeah.
hands. Okay, ready? Here we go. I got it. I'll send these to both of you.
Okay. Yeah, Nadia is this very inspiring anti-bias educator. I don't know if you know that about her, but she's a classroom teacher with 4 and 5-year-olds, and she does all this very courageous work. And she wrote a book about it. One story. She has so many, and there's a new film coming out called, what's it called?
It's anti-bias teaching. It's about the work teachers are doing in action in the classroom, and it's amazing. Not just because I'm in it, but
Not
it's
because-
actually really, really good. And I tear up every time I've watched it, all
Yeah.
6 times. Deb, did you watch it yet?
I have not watched
Okay,
it
it's
yet.
okay.
I'm not supposed to. Shh.
Oh yeah, that's right. This is recording. Shh. It's not out till April 1st.
I'm not going to watch it till April 1st.
But I will send you the trailer, Rusty.
Oh, I'd love to see it. Yeah. How do you
Anyway.
how do you sum it up? Or what's the
I mean, I feel
what are the
like
stories? Yeah.
yeah, the question, I've been doing anti-bias, I've been doing the work for a long time, but actually getting out there and sharing the work and the stories with Brian Silvera. I don't know if you know him, but he's my colleague, my thinking partner, my friend. Anyhow, a question we always get is, okay, here's all these articles we're reading, all these books, but what does it really look like in the classroom with children? Where do we start? What do we do? So that's what the video is. It's in the classroom, seeing teachers and children in relationship, talking about these big issues that can be scary, such as skin color, race. It's all about just really listening to the children and using an anti-bias lens in having these conversations and having some brave conversations. So it's just really inspiring. It's about maybe 6 teachers or so, all being featured in their work with young children and being interviewed as well about that work.
So the great thing about that is most of the people who are writing about that don't work with children. So, they obviously have some useful information, but people, there isn't really many examples out there of how does this really look when you talk to children about these sometimes, really spicy issues that, our big world is wrestling with. And what happens is children get those attitudes when they're little. Before they're 2, they actually are noticing differences and learning who's on top and who's on the bottom. So I'm excited because teachers are actually telling their stories here, and it's critical because a lot of times people like in our position who do this work of adult education, we don't work with kids. I've been working with kids now for back in the classroom for over 20 years, but most people don't. And I just know when I went back to work with kids, it was not an easy thing. I had all these big ideas and, I had Margie Carter in my ear all the time. And I would finally get to this point where I say, you come do that, because it's really different. The practice is really different than the wonderful visionary ideas. And how do we support educators to really do the work? And I know you have 2 kids, Rusty, so your work is sort of hands-on in your backyard, but most people don't spend time with kids anymore in a sort of regular way, with all the other things you got to do all day. So yay, Nadia, for this. Yay, Brian. Yay. The teachers I worked with at Epiphany are in it big time too. Veronica Reynoso and Joyce Jackson are big players. Their classrooms and kids are shown. So I'm really inspired and great. I'm excited to watch it.
Yeah, and me too. And coming out at a really, important time when more and more people are thinking about this, and that we know, like, well, the issues in the adult world with it all, but what would happen if we changed how young children approach or confront these issues, or how are guided through it, or having the conversations early on, and how will that change? It's one thing to, like, okay, I have adults try to have these hard conversations, and we're trying to learn and trying to relearn, things. But what if it's the initial learning, or the initial experiences that people have when they're little?
Well, and I think this relates to your book about risky play, because a lot of kids of color and kids from low income programs don't get outdoor play, don't get nature play, on behalf of the idea they have to be fixed, right? That there's this idea that they need to be more readied than other children. So I have seen that played out in so many ways. Like, I go into these Reggio inspired higher income programs, and there's all this time for free play, all these beautiful outdoor spaces. And then you go into Head Start or some of these other programs, and the kids barely get to go outside, and their outdoor areas are, pretty stark with not much natural things to do. So I think it totally relates to this book that you've written, that how do we help that happen? Not just for people who are privileged enough to be able to offer it, but people who are, basically being oppressed because they're thought of as less able and they need to be more ready. So we better not let them play because we have to teach them. So to me, that's a huge issue in our profession that we have to name.
It's
Yeah.
like, it's,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Rusty.
I would just say, it's like flipping it upside down in that, and then it relates to your book of, like, saying, oh, all these things that basically the adult, we want to be supporting and putting out as many materials and following children in their learning and growing and experimenting, even if if we're biased thinking that we have to be teaching, or there has to be teachable moments, or that children have to be school ready, or all this kind of stuff, realizing really it's like all these opportunities and the chance for them to stretch their brains and go where they want to go is making them school ready. And how do you get that across in your book of, like, supporting teachers to be like, okay, take a deep breath and let it go, follow what's happening, because that's actually the good stuff that is going to expand their brains and make the connections and help them reach their potential and stretch, I think.
We know. We
I was
know.
just going to say that what you're both saying sparked a couple of ideas in my brain. One of them was just going back to the video and anti-bias work, a couple of quotes that stood out to me and watching it from the other teachers was really how this work is about some deep soul searching of ourselves. So that's really important in thinking about. And also, Veronica says it's about, what kind of humans do we want to be? So those really stuck out to me in my heart and my mind, and I've been thinking about a lot. So, and then it's on the flyer advertising the video as well. I was like, okay, it wasn't just me. That those quotes really stood out. And the other thing, just thinking about children learning through play, being a teacher for over, let's see, maybe 12 years now, working with pre-K, it's about finding that balance. Yes, children learn through play. I feel confident these children are going to be ready for kindergarten, but it's also taking a step back and thinking about preparing them for the real world. So, for example, I shared the story about two children emptying out my beautiful collection of glass jars with markers in there, and they dumped them all out. And, there went my teacher, like, oh, I'm going to go stop them by my safety hat. Those are glass jars. And then I said, wait a second, I'm going to take a step back and see what their idea is. And what they wanted to do was make little enclosures for the little baby animals that they've been exploring recently. And they lined them all up, put the jars over them. They're being so careful in this dramatic play. So I was able to observe and just see the competence and remind myself of taking that time to not just jump in and stop play that it might be risky, but really seeing their ideas. But again, there goes my other hat in kindergarten. What might that look like, especially for children of color, if they go up to the art area, start dumping everything? Is that teacher really going to stop and pause and see what their idea is? Most likely not. So again, it's finding that balance of letting these children learn through play and explore and getting them ready for the real world outside our classroom bubble. So I feel like it's tricky.
Because the
Yeah.
real world outside hasn't caught up to the bubble that you're working on.
I
So it's a
agree.
weird,
Yeah.
so it's a weird thing to like prepare to go into something that's not necessarily going to be supporting the best practices of growth, and or just has so many other things they have to deal with that they don't have the
Yeah.
luxury to follow the play.
Yeah. It's really been my lifelong work. It's nothing new, right? And there's a long line of people that came before me, and there's a long line of people coming after me, like Nadia, and her experiences and her deep thinking and feelings about what she does. But I wanted her to tell you more of her stories about this idea of risky play, because she has some great ones that I'm not sure I'm thinking of it'll be a good bridge to what you just said about getting kids ready for school, about how you help children learn how to sit still in a way that's in line with, I think, what Rusty's saying in his book about children got to move, and there's so many benefits to it, and they're going to have to sit still when they go to kindergarten. So tell him what you've been doing about that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I feel like the first step has just been educating myself as well as the teachers in my classroom in learning about children's brains and their bodies, how their brains and bodies connect, and what they need, and the importance of the brain really can't, if you're telling them constantly to be quiet, sit still, their brain is focusing on that they're not taking in the information that you want them to take at this circle time or morning meeting, because they're so focused on that. They can't do both at the same time. But the movement for a lot of children is helping them really focus and listen and making that moment really meaningful, because it's helping them. So really looking at this, it's so different for every child. So from the very beginning of the school year, we talk about getting to know yourself. We all need something different to be successful, and we're going to learn about that together this school year. So, this child, you might need nothing. You just come and sit down on the rug, and you're ready to join our classroom community for this book we're reading. But this child, you might need something to fidget with. So we have a collection of little baskets on the table that children can go get to bring with them. You might be comfortable on the rug, but you might need to sit on a chair with a band on it, so you can put your feet behind it and get that input in your legs, etc. So we just explore a variety of different tools and help each child get to know themselves and really highlight that everyone needs something different to learn. And the children, they'll start to vocalize that, oh, I think I need a marble pouch today. And they'll go get a marble pouch and they'll sit there, and it's just this little pouch with a marble in it that can go back and forth. And that helps them be more present and contribute to our circle time or morning meeting. So again, just really, it's about us getting to know the children, being really present with them, and having this expectation that children really need to move and it's okay to move. And it's tricky. It can be hard because we're set in our ways of, okay, stop moving, put your feet down, put that puzzle back on the shelf or things like that. So it's tricky, but we've learned over time that it's so important to use that lens of children need to move. So what is our role as educators?
Yeah, and I think we have a misunderstanding that in order to learn, you have to sit still and listen. And everything we've been learning about children in the last, how many years would you say, Nadia? 7 or 8 years?
Yeah.
We were introduced to the idea of the sensory motor system, the proprioceptive and vestibular sense, which are totally connected to brain development. And that there's sort of this anti-intuitive thing that we think that when children are running around and moving, that it's wild and crazy and they're not in control. And it's actually the opposite, that when children are moving, they are more calm and present. They can feel their bodies in space. Their vestibular system helps them focus. So I've come to use the term children seek what they benefit from. And the children who move the most are the ones seeking it the most because their brain is telling them they need it the most. They haven't the pathways yet that help them do that. So I've been having, since Nadia inspired me this way, I learned it from her. She'll tell you that story in a minute, but since I've watched, she has a little video on, what is that site?
The teaching channel.
Yeah, where she talks about how she helps children learn about themselves so that they can figure out, how do I stay focused in a group? Because these are 4 and 5-year-olds about ready to go to kindergarten. So when she offers them these tools to be able to self-regulate, what are you going to need here? It's really a powerful idea because they are going to have to go do that. They're going to be, their kindergarten teachers don't necessarily know this information and do a traditional way. So I do these side-by-side observations with teachers in many places around North America. And one of the things we do is observe circle time and actually document how we see children seeking physical input, movement during circle. It's astonishing what you see. I mean, children are constantly moving, like chewing, because you get proprioception from your jaw. So they're constantly going, they move their bodies a lot. And if their teacher, chew on their shirt. If their teachers let them, they'll lay down on their bellies, because laying on your belly gives you that input in your whole body that helps you calm. So all of these ideas just totally changed how I think about my work with kids. It's like the notion of they move because it benefits them and their brain seeks it because it's about the pathways connecting up for actually seeing yourself in the world, focusing, self-regulation, emotional regulation, resilience to be able to, a lot of kids can't even climb up a hill anymore because they don't get much opportunity to develop that strength in their bodies. So that kind of physical resilience, I believe we are harming children on behalf of trying to help them learn and keep them safe. And to me, it's critical that we rethink this, because if teachers think about how most of their day is about directing children's movement. I mean, pretty much most of it. Sit still, sit on the chair, line up, go outside. This whole routine way we do things, we're constantly trying to get them to do something with their body. And we have to think about it differently. We're harming them. And one of the sources that I've really learned from is a book by Angela Hanscom. I don't know if you know this book, Rusty, but you will like it. In fact, you might want to get her on your book tour. Her book is called Balanced and Barefoot. And
Yes. Yep.
she's an OT, and she started a program called Timber Nook, which is all these outdoor play programs all around North America now. Trying to, and she was worked really closely with Richard Louv in this way. I think you have too. So she would be a good person to get on your book tour, because send her a book right away if you haven't already.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
that's
I mean, it is.
how Nadia inspired me.
Yeah, and it's amazing to think about, like, well, okay, where did this model of education where the teacher stands in the front and everyone's supposed to sit still and eyes up on the board on me, and you can kind of picture it in like black and white, image one room schoolhouses, or where, and then it's continued to evolve even into the modern day, where it's still like, no, the child has a natural flow and a natural way of being. These beings, the spirited selves in these bodies have a natural way to grow, and yet boom, we're kind of snapping it in because, well, it's some sort of control, and then the schools have to have so much information that they're trying to put in, and but it's based on these older ways. And yet it feels like, with all the learning and the things that you're putting out and discovering and reading, that it amazes me that we're still kind of going in those directions, when really now there's all this more information about the way the brain goes in the body and the connections, and how it can really be. And maybe in your book you're showing that, because then there's the tension. First there's like, okay, children are trying to do this other thing, and then there's the tension of the adult, it seems like, maybe kindergarten, elementary school, trying to get them to not do that. But it's almost like your book is saying, uh, watch what happens when actually you allow them to do what they need to do, and actually you then, as the adult, using your creativity, you add more things to help them go in the directions that they're going in, more materials, or you relook at the materials. So you pull away that tension, it seems like, and then you can follow them and then be amazed. But it's still a constant, tension or struggle with the adult. Like, wait, what's it supposed to look like compared to what happens when you let go and follow?
Nadia, do you feel that tension? You just talked about it, but how present really is it for you? Like, what do you
Well,
do instead? Yes.
recently I've called myself the safety patrol. And sometimes I feel like, oh no, I had to put my safety patrol hat on and think, okay, is right now what's happening? Is it a safety thing? Why am I feeling uncomfortable? Let me relook at what's happening um, before I give any guidance to the children, or if I'm observing another teacher. And it's this struggle of being the safety patrol, using a reflective lens. Um, so it is, I find it every day I have to pause and just think about my response to children. And I feel like, and Deb, you say this all the time, it's okay to say no. It's okay to have some guidelines. We've been calling them agreements, safety agreements in our classroom, where we meet with the children and we come up together with, here's some agreements with how our classroom is going to be safe. Like, I learned this in New Zealand actually from one of the classrooms, but in the beginning of the year, we've made an agreement that our feelings are safe, our bodies are safe, and our materials are safe. So I find myself with the children, let's think about our three agreements, and I'll pause them in their work, and we'll decide together if what they're doing is keeping all those three pieces safe. So that's been really helpful. But also there's those times where it's okay to redirect the play or give them something different that's still meeting that need. I have a story in the book about a child who would move all the shoes off the shoe rack so that he can lay in it. And I was constantly stopping him and having him put the shoes back, but not giving him that input he needed because I didn't have that lens yet. And then learning about sensory integration, learning about schema, and having that aha moment like, oh, he's seeking input for his body. He needs a place where he's feeling that, a place where he's enclosing his body. So it wasn't okay to constantly move everybody's shoes and get inside a rack, but we were able to find other opportunities like getting smaller boxes, putting lots of fabric in them, making little corners in the room where I'd move a shelf over so there was just that perfect space for a child to put their body between a wall and a shelf. So it's tricky work. It's definitely not easy. It takes a lot more time and a lot more thinking, but it's definitely worth it, and I enjoy every moment of it.
Yeah, I think it's about what's a better job, being a reflective person who notices things and is, amazed by kids, or the police, the preschool police. Like, I hate that job, being the preschool police. It's not fun. And children don't like that part of me. So I think that's where Nadia and I meet up. We call ourselves nerds because we love learning all of these different ways to view what children do, right? I don't think there's one right answer. We don't have one right answer to what is going on. But we like, what are the possibilities here? And one of them is, I have a headache and I don't want to deal with this today, so I stop it. I think that's okay, right? I think in your book, you talk about that idea of like, what's your yes? Like, how do you notice yourself? And I think it's really important for teachers to be comfortable in their environment. And if you're feeling nervous all the time about kids getting hurt and all of this, it's okay for you to figure out how to feel safe. But I always say to teachers, if that's how you feel all the time, you maybe need to find a new job, because it's not your job to stop things all the time. Or how do you figure out another way? I can't remember if I read this in your book or not, but when I was reading it, it made me think. Like when I worked, this was years ago, at the Burlington Little School up north of Seattle, we had all these gorgeous trees and the kids were always wanting to climb them. And we actually went from pre-toddler through grade 3. So a lot of kids could climb them. And I was always really nervous about that. It was making me crazy because I felt like if they got stuck up there, I couldn't get them down, at that point. Even that was a while ago. Now I wouldn't. So I worked at my coworker, Cindy, I called her She-Ra because she's a strong, powerful woman. So we made an agreement that when Cindy was on the playground, you could climb the trees because she could help you get down if you got stuck. When I'm on the playground, you can't climb those trees because I'm nervous. It's not about you. I know you're able, but if you get stuck, I can't get you. So I think children got that. That was not a hard thing for them to understand. But to me, that's the negotiation, that you get to feel comfortable, and children deserve to seek these things they're going to benefit from. And so how do you negotiate that and help that happen? And it's tricky, but it's way more fun to do this conversation than it is to just stop thinking and have a rule to follow, or be the police. So much better. The other thing Nadia described about things safe, I'm just trying to like talk about your book.
Oh yeah, okay.
Was that Rusty has that idea in his book too. Like, what if we only had these 3 rules, which is the rules you talked about in terms of keep our bodies safe, keep our materials safe. What was the other one?
Our feelings.
Our feelings. I don't know that you had feelings, but it had that idea that we can have a limited amount of rules and negotiate. Is that happening right now? So brilliant minds think alike.
Adults have lively minds too.
Yeah, they do. If we like, I think we have to invite that actually more than we have to invite children's lively minds. That I find more difficult is to invite adults, because it is, we have this idea that it's our role, which it is, to keep kids safe or to help them learn. That is our role. But how do we do it in a way that's engaging for us, that excites our intellect, that speaks to our hearts. And for me, it's my spiritual work, because I see these little sensory motor beings, young humans, are amazing. I mean, it gives me hope for the universe that these people are born with all these abilities to figure out the world. And I don't want to get in the way, right? I want to help that grow. And that's hard because I'm not like that anymore, right? They know way more about learning than me. They know way more about their bodies than I know about mine. So that to me is the work. Like trying to meet up with their minds and their bodies and figure out how do we learn, how do we get excited about this together. it's really it's fun. That's why I'm still doing it at age 69. Been doing it for over 50 years, older than Nadia is, almost older than you are, Rusty, because it's so interesting and engaging to see these amazing young humans. So join us.
Deb, I wanted to add something that you reminded me of as I was reading through some pages of Rusty's book is, again, with the safety patrol hat on, is the licensing. And I know often when I'm working with other teachers, whether at my school or at different schools, and encouraging them to just really pause and marvel at what the children are doing with their bodies or with the materials, that typically will come in. Well, it's a licensing rule, or Eckers is coming and Eckers says this, or, and so I really encourage folks to think about the role of Eckers or licensing. Like they want children to be safe, but our role is to also keep them safe. But how can we do that in a way where they're not being limited, right? So not being afraid of, okay, like just using that as a way to stop play all the time. Oh, licensing or this or that. So using that as a guide, yes, we also want to keep children safe. And how can we continue this sort of play and give children what they need in a safe way? Or, for example, I believe we have this in the book where I created a gross motor area in my classroom. And that was one of our questions when we were thinking about planning the space. Well, what about licensing? Are they going to be okay with an indoor gross motor space that has, ropes for swinging and a
Yeah,
punching
tell
bag?
Rusty that whole story, Nadia. I think that's a
Yeah.
really good one.
Yeah, well, I mean, it connects to a lot of what we've been talking about already. But my classroom had a big bunch of children who just really needed big body play, needed that input. And during that time, I was not too familiar with the sensory system yet. I for sure didn't know about schema yet. And I was constantly stopping in children's play because, my beautiful library area with my shelf, with my books and my pillows were constantly becoming forts, or children were piling on the pillows on top of each other, moving all the materials off the shelf to sit in the shelf. And I found myself just constantly stopping and redirecting play. So we really went to look for other perspectives and how we can really meet the children where they are and find out what they needed, because we weren't sure. So we had an OT meet with us, our director. This was months of planning, like what can we give these children? She suggested installing a hook in our rug area to put swings and trapeze, things like that, and to get a mat underneath, which was great. The children loved it. The only problem with that is that normally 10 children could work there. And when we set that up, only one child could work there. So then the 9 other kids who normally work there were off still dumping all the pillows, getting everything off the shelves. So it didn't really solve the problem. So after just using the thinking lens to really go deeper in what we wanted to do, really exploring why were we reacting this way, how can we meet up with the children and the families, we brought up this idea, well, maybe we just need a space where we can say yes, like you said in your book, Rusty, where children are getting all these needs. Should we set up this gross motor area in our classroom? And we made a list of, okay, here's the yes reasons. Here's some questions we have, like licensing. Where would we get the money to buy all these materials? They're so expensive. Where would we put this area? We love our classroom. We've been working so hard in collecting just real materials from garage sales and secondhand places. We love our space. Where would
And
we
it
put
was really small. It's not a big classroom.
and we have a small space. So really we had to have these deep conversations about our values and how we want to move forward. So again, this was took several months. So we decided, yes, we want a gross motor area. Let's be creative and figure out where we're going to put it. So we moved the dramatic play area, combined in with our science area, which became another story, and thinking about how children learn about dramatic play and science in all areas. But anyhow, so we moved the materials together and created our gross motor area where the dramatic play was. And we were able to just involve families and asking them, you have any pillows you could donate,
Mm.
any like big giant stuffed animals we can throw in there. We spent some of our budget on getting some mats. I brought in a punching bag from my home that was never used. So parents donated some punching gloves, and we were able to come in on a weekend. We invited families to come help us move everything and create the area. And it was just such a good decision. And seeing the children have a space where we can say, yes, you can throw those stuffed animals. Yes, you could throw all the pillows on top of each other. We put in a basketball hoop. Yes, you can throw all the small pillows, the stuffed animals in there, all the balls we put in there. So it was just a huge game changer for our classroom, and being able to say yes and meet the children where they were and providing all these ways to get the input they needed.
Yeah, she put like mats on the wall so they could bump into the wall.
Does it
And
bounce off the wall?
yeah, seriously. I mean, and again, in a tiny classroom. And so, Nadia, what did you notice about the kids after you did this? I'm like priming you because I want you to talk about. I think most people would think that that would create all this noise and it would be wild and crazy in the
Mhm.
classroom. And
Yeah.
tell
Well,
us.
I'll be honest, the first 2 weeks, whenever you try something new and big, expect chaos. So it was chaotic the first 2 weeks, but after that, it was a change in just seeing the children, how they could use it as a way to regulate themselves. So after they were in the area, it was um, it was a way for them to, like, okay, I did all that, I got all the input I needed. Now I'm going to go focus on something else. And you could just see that they had gotten their needs met through, again, whether it was punching something or throwing something or wrestling with a friend. And it really changed the dynamics in the classroom. It changed the energy, where again, it was a place where yes, you can go do that. And it just really it changed the way that the teachers were able to connect with the children, because we weren't constantly like, oh no, now they're dumping this, oh now they're dumping all the magnetel so they could sit in the basket. Like, they had a place where they could get all these needs met, and also they can connect with their peers. There was a sign up list where they could sign up their names, and they plan it together, like, Johnny, do you want to sign up with me? Okay, let's sign up together, because they knew they went in two at a time. So they'd sign up together. So it was also a big social piece.
How
I
long has
love
it
it.
been now that you have had that area?
I lost track. I want to say 5 or 6 years.
Okay. Okay. Wow. Imagine. I mean, I love it, and I love the idea of like uh, environmental design. You kind of followed and thought and follow the children and the idea of the schemas, and then thinking, okay, how do we change our environment to support that? And I think about, like, all the teachers that have a block area and a reading area. You have just tables and snack, but it's like if everybody had that kind of area too, a corner that was, we have quiet corners, but this is like, what if you have a rambunctious corner, you have a big body corner, because that is a need that children have. So you could have spent all your time, like you're saying, like saying no, or like, we don't do that, or you can only do that outside, or you can, whereas that is just something that's natural bubbling up. So instead of dampening that down, how do we how do we go forward and say, oh, we recognize that and let's create a space for it. Let's create room for
And
it.
there's nothing in the assessment tools that asks about children's active play indoors. Like every one of those checkbox things, those things that people get money for if they meet the boxes, they don't say anything about indoor active play, which to me, again, we're harming children on behalf of trying to help them. In fact, those tools encourage people to make little tiny areas of all different spaces, right? So it totally takes away any space to spread out or even lay down. So in my work with teachers on environments, I've been encouraging this, like using Nadia's story as an inspiration, because what happens is the climate of the classroom calms down. Because what we understand is this kind of play meets children's brain development needs to help them calm and focus. These two, the proprioceptive and vestibular systems, help you calm and see yourself. So, I mean, it's a no-brainer from my point of view that if you want a calm classroom, you have a place where children can move. So like even, there's a place in Canada I worked with and they have a really nice comfy couch. Well, the children never sat on the couch. They jumped from it, right? And they take the pillows from the couch and put them on the floor so they could jump into the pillows. And the teachers were constantly stopping it. So I offered them Nadia's story and this idea. So this now in their classroom is the jumping couch. That's how they use it. And they got to stop saying no. The children got to do this thing they benefited from, and the classroom just went, right? Calm down. So, you can even do little things is what I've been finding. If you put some kind of platform in your block area that children have to actually step up, off, and on, that takes care of some of this. If you have heavy things for them to move in your classroom, that helps them benefit and from this thing they're seeking. So you don't have to do big things like Nadia did, although it'd be really nice if everyone did. But just climbing a ladder up to a loft is really useful. I think if you see classrooms that have those things in them, they're a little calmer because kids get that input. So I've been starting to think about this everywhere I go because it's critical for kids' brain development. It's critical for, they're starting to see kids in early elementary grades with lots of sensory processing issues. And Angela Hanscom says it's because we don't let them move. From the time they're babies, we strap them in chairs and seats and chairs. That's another thing. Like, why are we spending tons of money on chairs for everything? I now just put my chairs in the corner and kids get to decide, are they going to sit on a chair or not to work in the room, because sitting is not good for kids. That's just what everything shows. It's not a good thing to do. So to be able to move a chair if you want to sit, and again, observing kids in chairs, it's fascinating. Like you will see kids never just sit in a chair. They're always rocking back or pushing their feet or putting their knees. I mean, they're constantly moving in a chair. So it's been life-changing for a lot of teachers to observe that and just put those chairs aside. Anyway, it's definitely radical thinking against sort of the corporate world that tries to, get us to buy all their stuff. But I think we really need to think about it differently.
Well, it's amazing to just, think differently, and the solutions can be simple, but it's like it's just reverse thinking. The idea of pushing away the things that we think are normal, or the things that we think that are givens in classrooms, the things that we think that children should be doing, as opposed to just seeing it with a different lens. You're like opening our eyes a little bigger and thinking about it, but having, your guidance and help and experiences and stories to be like, wait, you can actually do this. And like the idea of sneaking it in there, sneaking the upper body stuff in with heavy things to lift, or the climbing, or the, all this kind of stuff, knowing that it's doing them good, but it's not exercise or calisthenics, or, I don't know, it's not any kind of like formula, but it's just like having it part of the flow of play.
Yeah.
But
And in fact, they say leading kids in active play isn't helpful. Like organized approaches, that's not what they need. They need self-initiated play.
I
So
was doing
Nadia,
oh,
sorry, go ahead.
well, I was just following up on that idea of like sneaking it in there. I was doing designing like a little water play thing that you could put outside, hook up to a hose, like a post. And I was very careful to like measure children. And so then when they could come up to it and, just put a bucket right at their height. But then I was, trying it out at a local preschool that I really like. And the director was like, oh, well, I've learned to like not put it at their height, actually do things lower. So she suggested putting lower. So every time they went to use it, they'd have to squat down, fill their bucket, and then they'd stand up. And it was just like sneaking in this extra muscular body thing to do, just to kind of hit those marks that you're talking about.
In fact, you get the most proprioceptive input when you're in a squat. Like your whole body is all, sort of pushed together. So that's one of the more, you get a lot of input that way.
That's neat.
I want to ask Nadia, we've been nerds about this schema theory. And the thing about schemas is that children use their bodies for schemas first, right? These repeated patterns in children's play is what the definition of that we've used for schema, and we learned about it in New Zealand. And there's a woman in Great Britain, I think she's a woman, Chris Atchie, and have written about it extensively. And they've identified about 40 repeated patterns. And some people, the really nerdy people, Nadia, we need to go here, but they like horizontal, vertical, and, they just look at every little detail of how children are exploring something. Because again, it's connected to brain pathways. So when we learned about this, we started, she's in San Francisco, I'm in Seattle. We start sending each other pictures like, look at this. Oh, look at this. We still do. It's still something pretty regular. Anyway, I was just curious, Nadia, what's your favorite schema these days? Do you have?
Yes, I do. Right now, my favorite schema, because the children are exploring it so much in my classroom right now, is the enclosures. And we're talking about it with the children. So they're able now to identify the schemas as well. And they'll vocalize, oh, look, I made an enclosure. Let's fill up the enclosure more. And they're 4 and 5. And after they make their enclosures that are all amazing, detailed work, they want to fill up the middle. So they get a basket of, wooden letter tiles, dump. Let's add the pom-poms, dump. So there's still, that little bit of like, oh, cleanup's going to be so fun. But again, they're getting so much out of this work. Even connecting to Rusty's story about the bucket, like here they are going to go get this heavy basket full of these letters, walking it over, having to squat, the dumping. There's just so much learning going on, the social piece, the mathematics of just really looking at the work. I have to share some pictures, Rusty. I don't know if you're on our Facebook page, but just it's very detailed work when they're making these enclosures. There's sorting, there's classifying. It's just so much. My teacher I'm working with, Riley, we're constantly amazed every day to just see what they're working on, taking pictures, and it's been pretty amazing, the work they're doing.
That sounds well.
Yeah.
I love that idea of, I used to like be a little critical of some of the Montessori rules. Like you can only get one thing off the shelf at a time and bring it over. And when you put it away, it's the same thing. And then it occurred to me that is perfect because transporting is a schema and moving is important. So here's this built-in guideline in Montessori that says children will go back and forth and back and forth. I still don't love it because it's like a little rigid of a rule, but you can kind of see the brilliance under it if you understand these lenses of physicality of moving like that and the schema of transporting. Like children just like to move things, often without a reason, except for just the back and forth of their bodies. I had a moment when I was observing in a family childcare where a child was moving water from one area to another, from the water table to the sand area. And my initial thought was, oh, we should move that water table closer. But no, because once the child got to the sand area, didn't even pay attention to what happened after the water got dumped. Didn't notice anything about changing the sand, just went back for another, and then tried very many different ways to carefully transport. I've been seeing that with the kids in my new school I'm at right now. Yay, I'm back with kids 3 weeks now. The same thing, right? There's not a water source on this playground, but the kids find it because it rains, right? So there was a puddle in the middle of the concrete, which was clear across the playground. And the mud kitchen is clear across the other end of the playground. So, there was this idea we teachers should bring them some water. And I went, no, watch, because the going to get the water out of the puddle and bringing it to the mud kitchen was as interesting to them as having water right there. So I just think this idea of movement and risky play involves this schema, right? This repeated patterns. You'll see children do it with their bodies first. Trajectory, all this jumping that you show here and flinging yourself off of something, rolling on the ground in rough and tumble play. Those are all schemas. Those are all the brain saying, oh, I want to, to me, this is how I characterize it. I don't know if I'm scientifically accurate, but I think I am. So these young humans with these amazing sensory motor systems, the function of their brain is to take in, and their body is to take in tons of information. That's their job. It's just a lot of information. In fact, they are way better learners than we are because of that. And they have more capacity than the most incredible computers or scientists. In fact, scientists are studying children's play to try to program artificial intelligence, to help artificial intelligence learn. They're watching children's play to see if they can somehow inform AI, which kind of scares me, but it's kind of cool too. Anyway, so here are these amazing sensory motor beings with all of this capacity to experience the world. And then they have this built-in desire to organize that information by doing repeated actions again and again and again with their body and with objects. So as it comes in, they're like, I'm going to try it here. I'm going to try it here. I'm going to try it here. I'm going to do this with my body. So to me, it's like this miracle. Like, I want to help it grow. I don't want to stop it. I mean, obviously I want to keep them safe and help them get along and all of that stuff, but they are amazing. They have amazing capacity, and we have to see it, because that to me is what will help us, is that when we see how amazing this and how exciting it is, we'll want to see more. We'll want to see the role we can play to help it grow. So that's where our books hook up. Our book and your book are totally aligned.
Mm-hmm. How do we feed it? How do we feed it? How do we observe? How do we check ourselves? How do we support it, celebrate it, honor it?
Yeah, and that's what this has, gorgeous pictures, which help us see it, right? Like all these joyful, amazing photos. Our book has wonderful things about that too, and stories of kids. So to me, that's the way that we tell stories and we show this amazing stuff at work. And then we help people, we acknowledge that it's what we're saying isn't easy. This is not an easy thing to do, what we're suggesting. Like Nadia said, it's not easy to have to think about all this. But for me, it's what keeps me lively.
So it keeps us excited about the work.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And the changes that you make, and when you see, your reflections and the changes that you make, see it in action, and see the children thriving, and just then not having barriers to the things that they want to do, or they just need to do, or that they can't help but do. I like that idea of that these schemas, this is just how they move in the world. This is what's happening in this time of life.
Yeah.
And how do we stand back and support it, and yeah, honor it, and
And to me, sharing it with others, like that's Nadia's my partner that way. And I have several other people that we get to be excited together. That helps us, right? What do you think this is about? Like, we'll do that. What do you think's going on here? That's what our Facebook group is. There's a lot of Facebook groups just show pretty pictures, and I get that. We get that. We're preschool teachers. We're always looking for cool new stuff. But we started this group because we wanted people to go deeper. Like, so why would you offer this? What happened when you offered it? What did you marvel about? Why? That here's this deeper story. And so to me, that's another big piece of it. Like, how do you find people to get excited with? Because there's not one way to look at something. And how do you find out what other people see and think? Because that again enriches your intellectual vitality for the work. Help me think about this. What do you see? I can't wait to see those in closing. Are you going to post those on the page
Oh
today?
gosh, yes, I think I will put a collection of them. It's just been
Yeah. Okay. That'll be
um,
wonderful.
like
Yeah.
works of art.
Yes. Yes. And we've been getting other teachers around. I mean, it's amazing how fast this group has grown. We have what, 2.5K, but some of those groups have 85K. So we want to influence that.
yeah, you're expanding.
Yeah, we've only had ours, what, 2 months maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Gosh.
it's exciting. Other teachers are posting their amazing work and um, of the children and their thinking. So
It's funny. I remember being in kindergarten, and at some point there were like adults that were coming and kind of observing the children, observing us, and then having little interviews. And maybe they were high schoolers, or maybe they're college students doing studies and stuff. And I remember just thinking, like, they were trying to understand the play. God bless them. God bless the adults trying to learn this stuff. But I remember as a child, just thinking, well, we're just playing, like even thinking, yeah, they're trying to like focus on these specific things, but for the child, they've already moved on to the next thing, or the next thing, or the next thing. And it was just funny, just thinking like, oh, these people are trying to understand, but yeah, this is just our normal thing. We're just doing what we do. And then,
that's interesting.
yeah, as a kindergartner. But it's so valid now as an adult to be fascinated and love this stuff, and want to learn and support it, and figure it out, because it is fascinating.
I
Yeah.
wanted to add for those viewing this video, if you're getting that initial reaction of, oh, I can't do this work, or, we're not allowed to do that, or licensing or ECHRs, something I learned from Deb and Margie Carter was to have documentation up of the children doing this work, the importance of it, the research, the what they're learning. So having this up for when you do get that visit, or your director comes in, or families are asking you questions, you have this documentation of the children engaged, of the learning that's happening, all. And you could, again, this happened to me with the gross motor area. It's like, oh no, what am I going to do when licensing comes in? Do we hide the area? Do we throw it in the closet? So
Which is a usual response. Let's just get rid of everything.
yeah. So Margie encouraged me to now have some documentation, have photos of the children in the space, write a story about what you're seeing, about their competence, about what they're learning, have some research in there. So I did that. I put up in the cabinets above the area this whole documentation. And then licensing came, and I was really nervous. I was like, oh no, I'm going to get dinged. I'm going to have to get rid of the area. And you're not supposed to talk to them while they're visiting. So we just went about with our day, did everything the same as we normally would do. We didn't change anything about our day. And then came our meeting at the end of the day where we get interviewed, and the space did not come up at all. And I said, do I bring it
Yeah.
up? Like, what do
Yeah.
I do? Like, am I off the hook? So I didn't bring it up. The assessor didn't bring it up. So, and then all the teachers like, okay, what happened? What they say? I'm like, nothing. Not one word about it. Not even acknowledge the space. Nothing. So next thing you know, I get the report back. I got a good point, because I want to get good points
And
for my
Nadia's
environment.
like that. She likes to get 5s on everything.
And again, there was no mention of the space. So I thought it was really weird, but I fell off the hook. So here I am in a room full of hundreds of people sharing the story with Margie, with Deb. And next thing you know, do you remember this, Deb? Who gets up? Who gets up? The assessor. She's there.
The one that
Oh, wow.
came to your room?
Or I'm sorry, the supervisor of the assessor who came to my room. And she
okay.
gets up and she goes, oh, yes, I know the story. I know what you're talking about. The assessor, I'm the supervisor. And she came to me. She didn't know what to do with the area. She didn't know what to think, where to put it. You know? So, you know, the first thing I thought of, okay, were the children safe? Were they having fun? Yes. Okay, great. Well, let's not worry about it. So it was really funny that here I am telling the story, and they were there, and you know, I felt like, okay, great. She saw it, and she saw the children were being safe. She saw the learning, how mindful we were being, and it really. And we had this group full of people as well who felt like, okay, we could do this work too.
Yay. I don't
Yeah.
remember that, but that's not surprising.
Yeah, licensors and assessors they're being confronted by different things that they haven't seen before. And, you know, with this kind of play or these kind of environments, or the risky stuff or the loose parts or the mud and mess, you know, it's often they have to make these judgments of like, is this best practice? I always think, is this best practice or worst practice? Because if it was just like some room where there was chaos going, like punching bags and pillows or things are spilled, you know, it almost looks like, could this be worse? Do these people know what's going on here, or did they do this on purpose? So I'm always talking to people about like, you have to just show that you're doing this mindfully. You have logs outside. You have a boulder. It's not that you didn't realize that was there, that you put it there, and there's reasons that you did it, and as part of that documentation or your risk benefit analysis of why it's out there, that you want this stuff out there, and you know the value of it. And you know, different people that I work with talk to their licensors about it, or feel like they have to talk about it. But you also touch on that idea, I think is really interesting. There's like what licensors will really say, but then there's the fear of what licensors will say. And I talk about that in the book of like, you know, you could have stopped and not done the big body corner, because you would have feared licensors would never like that. And people, you know, same with outdoor play. Like people think, oh, licensors would never go for that, so I'm not even going to try. And so we like, in our minds, we have this fear of it, and based on experiences that we've had or horror stories that we hear, but that often stops us. And so I think a big part also is like taking deep breaths and knowing, like you said, the licensors, they have the same goals that we do ultimately, for children to be safe and healthy and develop the best they can. But I think deal with the real licensors versus the censors in our head, and see what happens afterwards. And I was talking to, I interviewed some licensors for the book, because I wanted to get that perspective on things. And I did one of the book tours recently with a state person at the state level in Utah of licensing. And I had never heard this before, because I talked about this idea of the fear of licensors and stuff. And she says that licensors often feel like they're the scapegoats. That when people are nervous about something, an educator might be nervous to have loose logs on the playground. So they kind of say, oh, licensors would never let us do that. because they're nervous, but in reality, licensors might be fine with that kind of thing. So it's a funny, that goes to that our own feelings of safety or what makes us nervous. And then it's true licensors might not, but it might not be true that licensors would do
Well,
that.
I'm going to put a plug in for this thinking lens that Margie Carter and Ann Pello and I developed. We call it a thinking lens for reflective practice, because those are a lot of the different stories that we tell. If we make that visible to ourselves, that we see there are many stories to tell about this moment. And the first one is this idea as an adult, what do you see here? And what do you love? What bothers you and why? Like that's the first place to go. And then in that section is what are some regulations or licensing things that might be at play here. But then it goes through and says, okay, look at the kids. Where do you see the children's competence here? Can you see what they're seeking and how they're showing you they're able to do this and why they do it? And then the next one is, what do you think the children's perspective is? Like, can you put yourself in their shoes? And then there's this idea of what other perspectives are we missing? So, and how's the environment impacting this? So it's actually a protocol. I call it a structure for openness, because this idea, you say we have all this stuff in our head. If we put it out in front of us, you can make your own based on your own ideas that you want to consider. To me, that's such a huge piece of what we need to be doing, is considering what are all the stories we could be telling about this? What are all the perspectives? And oftentimes there are conflicting values in there, right? Keeping kids safe is a really high value, but also children seeking this play because they benefit from it is a really high value. So what are we going to choose right now and why? And I think it's important to choose to be intentional. And you have to practice this way of thinking away from the group. So that's why it's important to document and read and, so that you practice thinking through these ideas. And you're allowed to stop kids, like Nadia said. I think you can. But you have to think about why, like what values rising up. And again, if you're stopping kids too often, you need to find a new job, because that's not your work to stop kids. So I just think that's really critical. This idea of this sensor in your own head, you got to get it out there. You got to examine it with other people so that you can have, to me, when you do that, you have so many possibilities to choose from. And then you get to choose from what you love and what you value, not just what you think the licensor might do. You get parents' perspectives in there, because there is not a right way to do this work. There are wrong ways. If you harm children emotionally or physically, that's wrong. But there isn't a right way. There's so many possibilities. And to me, that allows for different cultural perspectives. It allows for, some of the research to come in. Piaget wasn't the right way. In fact, there's a lot of stuff that I've found in my work where he was wrong, in terms of what I've determined. So there's just different ways. And which lens do we want to take up right now so we can make decisions and really love what we do? Not easy. It's not easy. It takes practice, right? That's why we call it reflective practice. You have to practice it, because you have so many things going on when you actually work with children, to actually be able to pause, like Nadia described, and really see what children are doing. You have to practice it, because it's not the thing that's a natural reaction you want to move in. So she's brilliant at that. I'm pretty good at it too, but I'm the old lady and I have all these young teachers I work with, and they get to do that stuff that I don't want to do. I don't wear a watch. They get to decide, is it time for lunch? And, if it were me, we might never have lunch. So I think we need all those people, right? We need to say, oh, let's keep doing this for a while. And we need them to say, it's time for lunch, for goodness sake. So.
And just in continuing to, I learned last year from the group in my classroom, when we talk about important things, they said, okay, we have to spread the word. So anyhow, in spreading the word of how important this work is, and it's not easy, when I'm doing these webinars and facilitating conversations, I talk about these different lenses to use. And I think it's so important also to have in there this anti-bias lens. And Debbie reminded me when you were talking about the family's perspective, there's also thinking about families and culture. And I was, while you were talking, thinking about my mom. So there's all these things that I'm setting up for my toddler that I have at home. She's about to start walking and she's exploring. And since she was very young, she's been showing me all this schema thinking. So, I get excited. I show my mom all this stuff I'm setting up, and my mom writes back, "Why'd you put that cardboard there with crayons? You're going to teach her to draw on walls and do graffiti. And, why'd you do this? She's going to dump all that. You're teaching her to dump things." So I'm like, okay, I got to educate my mom now. But anyhow, just it reminded me of the importance of having that cultural lens as well, and being showing families and thinking together about this work. It's important as well.
Mm.
Yep, because early childhood was developed by white people and continues to be white dominated. So it's a really important conversation to have, because the white way isn't necessarily good. Some of it is not so good. So I really appreciate that about what Nadia is doing again, like we started this conversation. And I'm trying to do the work as well. It's a little bit easier with toddlers, which is my age, because they're noticing differences and you can just make it normal. And they're dealing with fairness all the time in their own, I had that's mine kind of thing. And I think we teach children that stuff. We teach them it's about the stuff rather than different ideas we might have about what we want to do with some object. So anyway, I appreciate you, Nadia. You are my shero.
Appreciate you too, Deb.
She lets me boss her around a little bit too much.
Well, you're both my heroes.
Shiro, we're not he.
Shiros. Okay, I can say Shiros.
I wonder how we can gender neutralize that word. Let's call us O's. Rose. Rose. I've been thinking a lot about that too.
About language?
About gender neutral, like how, the minute we're born, there's already this whole sort of plan for us before we even are born, all these gender reveal parties. And so I love here, and I don't know if it's true in Ithaca. I know in San Francisco and Seattle, there's a huge, huge outpouring of non-binary thinking and pushing back about gender roles.
Yeah, Ithaca follows Seattle and San Francisco.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, it's a little, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's so many things that I'd like to keep talking to you about, but I don't want to take up all your time. But
people probably turned off a long time.
Right.
The record.
Oh my gosh, so amazing. Yeah, I feel like my brain has just been expanding. Yeah, I want to be like moving myself to like help the brain, but maybe we adults don't do that anymore for our learning. But yeah, so awesome.
Thank you for this beautiful book.
Yeah.
For your beautiful book. I don't have a copy of our book. I just gave it away yesterday. My last copy. Do you have a copy of our book, Nadia?
I just gave my last copy away as well. That's why I had to hold up my other book.
I went to get it, but I couldn't find it. I gave it to Hesley.
Hey, let me ask, a lot of people ask me with risky play and this kind of thinking about, saying yes more to all this stuff that might look wild, talking to the parents. And you talked a little bit about that, about documentation and saying why it's good. But I think people are really looking for resources of like, how do I tell parents, that this is good for their kids, that the stuff that we want to try, how do I get them on board? What do you say? Or how do you have resources or go-tos?
I'm thinking about, I think just off the top of my head, our book is a great resource, Deb, because I think something parents really connect to is these stories with their children in it. So
Mhm.
taking on in documentation the role of storyteller, and in that storytelling highlighting the competence and the learning, and also inviting the families to think along with you. So at the end, having some questions for them. Are you seeing this kind of play at home? What
Mhm.
materials are you offering your child to explore this schema or risque play or whatever it is? So I found that rather than send families an article to read, having some real stories about their children engaged and having some research in that story you're telling, like about how this is, you know, scientists have researched that this part, you know, maybe tell them about some brain development in just a little piece, not a whole article. They can really connect to it. And I find families will write me back like, yes, I'm seeing this at home too, but I was stopping it. Thank you for teaching us about schema. And I let my child have my purse and dump everything and put it back in 20 times. And it was just such a game changer at home now that I am able to use the schema lens. So I'm getting parents really engaged in thinking with us.
Hmm. It's like we're different species, children and adults.
That's what they say.
Yeah. Yeah. Like it's the same material. We're in the same rooms with the same stuff, but it's all, we look at it in such different ways.
Yeah. Alison Gopnik, do you know her research?
Mm-mm.
She's a professor at Berkeley who studies educational psychology and philosophy. And she wrote a book called, well, she's written several. Her newest one is called The Gardener and the Carpenter. Um, and she sees sort of this idea about children that if you treat children like you're a carpenter and you try to make everything measure to make a chair, you're going to fail because children, that's not how they grow. Versus if you see your role as a gardener, you know what that looks like. It's really different. The seeds, the soil, you create the environment to help it grow. Anyway, she says specifically that children and adults are different species because our brains are so different.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yet then, so we're different and we approach things differently, but it's the adults that have the power. Like, what if it was children that had the power of like, no, mom, you can't just keep your stuff in your purse. You have to dump it out. You're not dumping it out enough, or, you know, but we put our power in what we think is the right thing because we are the ones in power. But, and yet if we honored or we looked at it as more as equals, what would that look like? Or, you know, you're seeing that.
Or use our power in a way that's really useful, like to be able to acknowledge we have the power. And that's exciting. And it's also a huge responsibility if you understand children, right? That we, you know, we don't even have to do anything intentionally and they learn from us, right? They're learning from us every second when they're really young. So that's scary and means we have to really pay closer attention to who we are and be more intentional about how we put ourselves out in the world. Because that's another story. That's a new book that I'm writing about children's natural skills and dispositions for relationships, uh, empathy, compassion, and fairness. They already get born with that too, and we teach it out of them. So that's a whole other topic.
Mm-hmm.
Rusty, going back to your question about resources, look up Wendy Lee and learning stories. The stories that we share in our book, Deb, they're learning stories. So we're highlighting the children, we're highlighting their competencies, which is what learning stories are all about. So I suggest you look her up.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a cool thing. And the other cool thing about it is that you can write them directly to the children. Dear Musa, here's what I saw you do today that I loved. So it's a really powerful tool for making that connection with families and children. To me, that's another thing, to show children back what you see them doing. Making their learning visible to them is a powerful tool for their learning.
It's also a powerful tool. We've been using them a lot in reading them at our morning meeting time. And the children look forward to it. Like, when are you going to write a story about me? When is it my turn? But it's also a way to support the anti-bias goals in seeing how everyone's different and really highlighting and embracing difference, as well as connections and similarities. So the children naturally see that. They'll say, me too, or, oh, that's different. That's cool. So it's just a great way to, again, quoting a 5-year-old, seeing how humans are different and how cool that is. And if we weren't different, we'd be like robots, and that would be boring.
Mhm.
5-year-olds are very smart.
Yeah. Well, thank you for celebrating with me childhood and play and possibilities. And I look forward to joining in the lively minds conversation and keep it going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you
Rusty.
for inviting
Yeah.
us.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, thank you for inviting us and joining the spread the word movement and sharing these stories in your book.
Yeah. All right. All right. Well, have a good rest of your day. And let's
Yeah.
keep talking. Let's keep going with this
Yeah,
in the future.
definitely.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
All
Bye, Nadia.
right.
Talk to you soon.
Have a great day. Bye.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.